My task becomes easier because we have got such a good galaxy of speakers. So must thank everyone here for giving time on a Tuesday morning, and also the speakers who are massively busy but still wanted to come and give their thoughts and set the ball rolling for the day. So thank you so much again. So basically, from the little that I could actually gauge on the sector for the last few days, I have been reading all about ART. What I can say is that ART, this ART is a complex art, and it's pretty. More I read it, it's like peeling an onion. It just keeps getting deeper and deeper. And I have heard so many panel discussions by all our stalwarts here, and still I have so many questions. So I would also request, in case I miss out on any point, I'd like to have your involvement also from the speakers, because the speakers are on the dais are really great, but our attendees are also so much more into the subject. So in case I do miss out on any key points, please raise your hand and maybe briefly ask a question if you can. We have about 45 minutes, sir. I hope we don't delay you for your flight, so we'll try to make the best of this opportunity. So I'll just start from you, Dr. Nitiz Murdia. Where are we now from where we actually were last year? It had a great start. The laws have been put in place. A lot of anticipation was getting built. What's been the progress so far? So initial thoughts.
So as you said about the law, I think it's like Gita. When I started reading, every time I find something new in the law. So yeah, so as professionals, as doctors, I think it's a very complex law also, and it takes time to try to understand what it is, what are the benefits, what is that you have to do in terms of the data protection, what is that you need to do in terms of reporting, and how to follow the law, break it down into SOPs, break it down into checklist, so that people who are working in your clinic knows that what they have to follow, and indirectly they have to follow the law. So the first thing that we did is try to frame SOPs, try to frame checklist as per the law, so that people around our centers can follow the SOPs, can follow the checklist. Where we are now, this law came in Jan 2021. Obviously, whenever something comes new, it takes a bit of time for states to act. At the end of the day, health is a state subject. Some states have already formed the state authorities and state boards. There are a few states which haven't, like Bihar and UP. There have been some extensions given by the central government to enforce the law. But I think we are going in the right direction. I think this law is bringing a lot of credibility to the whole IVF industry, though there are a few teething issues, in terms of enforcement of this law, which I think even when the PCPND law came, it took a lot of time for it to get enforced, and I feel that even for this law, it'll take a bit of time. But eventually it should. In terms of how the law was designed, they wanted to put a stop on the commercialization of the donors and the surrogates. That was the main intention of putting this law, and to register all the centers who are doing IVF treatment, and to regularize the entire IVF treatment industry in this country, to take it in the direction. So I feel going forward, slowly and slowly, all the states have started issuing the registration certificate. Most of them have, and some of them have not. Some of the states are pending inspections, which I think eventually with time will happen. And the states which have not formed, the authority and the board will eventually should form, going forward. And, the whole industry should shape up in the right direction. There have been teething issues in the first 2 years in terms of the donors and the surrogates. There have been a lot of patients who are waiting and suffering because of, this law came into picture and they can't undergo a treatment, which I think, though it's a sad part, but I think with the coming of the law and how it is looking in the future, it should shape up well. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So overall, looks like a positive step. Any thoughts from you, Dr. Palshetkar? You had mentioned about, because sometimes the regulations tend to become a lot more tighter, and to keep it a little more free-flowing is what you had mentioned at the initial stages when this law was enacted.
Yeah, I think, just to take off where Nitiz said that it's difficult even for the doctors to comprehend. Every time he opens it and, you find newer nuances. So I think what we need to take home a message is even the people who come for inspection to us need to be educated. So there has to be a training of those officers. What exactly is this? What are we trying to do? And as the whole aim is to make this this treatment very easily available, and absolutely there should be transparency. I think that was the idea behind all this regulation and all. And another thing which I personally feel is that laws are very good because unfortunately none of us do anything unless it is the law. But it has to be patient friendly as well as doctor friendly, because otherwise then it becomes difficult for people to follow. Especially I feel the youngsters who are coming in now, who are finishing their MBBS and all. Women's health, I know all over the world, women are the downtrodden, so there are a lot of protection for women, and that is why we have all these laws which are coming in. But what happens is, if a person takes gynecology, I think there are at least, I don't know how many laws we have to follow. So the younger generation which is actually coming in is thinking twice. We have to follow PCPNDT, the ART law, then there's a breastfeeding law, then of course the nursing home laws are different, then of course all the fire licenses, etc., etc., etc. So I think it's really important for the government. I mean, we've got a Prime Minister who's so progressive. So they need to understand that it needs to be friendly on both the sides. And now PCPNDT, after we have all fought for decades, it has become much better. So I don't want the same thing happening with the ART. So we need to, work with them, converse with them, and get it streamlined.
Right. Your thoughts, ma'am?
Well, I come from a background of having started the ART laws way back 20 years ago. In 2000, it started in the Indian Institute of Science with Professor Anand Kumar and Dr. Bhargav. And I was one of the members. 20 years I was in that committee. And we formed this ART guidelines. And we were also part of forming the National Registry, for which I am currently the chairman of the National Registry. But what happened in the whole bargain was the objectives of forming this ART law was to regulate the ART law, and the idea was to have protocols. But when we found that there was a rampant misuse, quote unquote, of using the ART law for the use that it was proposed for, but it was taken as an off-label use, then the government got into action and to say that the woman must not be put into a kind of disgrace using it in a commercial way.
Sure.
This became a knee-jerk reaction because the foreign press started taking it in a different way because of a few black sheep, and I'm sure you will have it in every profession. But with that same brush, they painted everyone in that profession, which was wrong. So what they did was they forgot that the procedure started with ART, and they suddenly brought in the surrogacy law. And they were trying to put the cart before the horse and pass the surrogacy law, when they knew fully well that the ART law encompasses surrogacy and the entire gamut. So if they had only taken the ART law and passed it, you wouldn't have a separate surrogacy board and ART board, because it was actually reinventing the wheel. And what happened thereafter, after going through the 210 guidelines, there were so many cases coming up in the court where we didn't have a law. So every case that came up had to be a court precedent. So case laws and then court precedent, and therefore that became the norm of the day. So then the government decided that we don't want to become quote unquote surrogacy capital, because many people in busloads started coming into Mumbai, into Bangalore, into other places. I'm not naming any person, but I'm saying that this became, for a default term, a surrogacy capital. And considering that India was going towards a kind of a push for an economic forum, a G20, G8, and whatever, we did not want to be known as a surrogacy capital. But as a result of it, one acts like a knife can cut an apple, it can cut a throat. But if you use to cut a throat, it's bad. If you cut an apple, it's good. But the invention itself is not bad. But what happened towards the end was that it was, projected to the politicians as bad. Just as they were forming these laws, etc., a few instances that came up into the public and was blown out of proportion by the press, and that was business in itself, and kept on coming up again and again. So politicians decided that they had to do something to curb it. And the laws were being formed around that time. So the good doctors, as usual, sat and did their work. The voting went on with the people who did not have work. And so the people who got voted into power were not the real people who had to get into power. And we left with people who were just going on talking and talking. So there became the armchair politicians, and our societies became totally bereft of any objectives. So it was such a state, and this is what happened to our PCPNDT, that the real consultants who were on the war field were not actually represented when the policies were made. So much so that when I was called to the Rajya Sabha, I was called to the parliamentary committee which was being addressed. In the wall of the house, we had social scientists, we had people who were there, who were far removed from the battlefield where I was facing the people. They always felt that the doctors were actually harassing the surrogate, and therefore the commissioning couples were actually fleecing the surrogate or the donor, when actually it was the other way around. But who actually knew that the donors were also fleecing the surrogate, the intending couple? Nobody knew. And yet you had books written about how bad the doctors are, how bad the surrogacy agents are. But have you ever known how bad the surrogate themselves are, or the surrogate's husband was, how bad a drunkard he was, and how he used to beat his wife, and how he used to take that money and live with the second wife? Those never came out to the forefront. So what did the politician want to feel? These couch potato doctors are making money, so we should harass them. They are not giving the money bags to the politicians to earn their next 5-year term. So let's harass them. So what happened is, we were so busy when the elections took place for the next cesarean section and the next IVF cycle, so we lost our chance to put in that vote. Therefore, we just felt that whatever we had done, and I could very proudly say for 21 years where I worked without a break with the ART law, was wiped away by just a few ministers who had no idea about ART, who formed the law in 3 months and had so many things which needed to be answered. While law is good, we have to follow the law, but the law has to be implementable. If it is not implementable, then it is as good as the law sitting out over there carrying dust like many other laws. So if you can't follow the law because of the intricacies, then it just creates a fear hype, and it is one more step for corruption.
Is there a scope for dilution, ma'am? I mean, are you hinting
Well,
that
regulations can, but an act to change takes a lot of time. And they did not have, like in any foreign country, any Western country, you'll always have the federation, the societies being invited, and there is a debate with the societies before the act is formed. But here, it was never there. The act is formed, and this from the ICMR, and I was a chairman. I was not called. And why is it that we sit for 20 years on this government committee and we are not even called for a consultation when the final act is put out? And then finally, we are looking like really idiots, spending so much of time to go ahead and then listen to a law, and we are made a joke of it in every meeting, saying, what were you sitting there for 20 years and doing? Is this the kind of law you're putting out? So I rest my case here. I pass it to my colleague.
and absolutely the right place to hand it over to Mr. Sanjiv Navangul.
Yes.
It gives a lot of feeling of parallels with clinical trials rules. Yeah, you know, it just went in one direction, and then when the whole thing got tightened up, it became so difficult for anyone to come in and do trials. So, from the industry point of view, how do you see that?
I think, you can say it from the industry point of view or from the community point of view. The important thing is exactly what Dr. Rao said in a different way was, you make roads so that millions of people can travel. There will be accidents. So you get rules formed to ensure that those accidents are minimized. You don't get rules formed to stop driving. And that balance in policy making has to be always there. And that balance can only come when there are enough experts who are dealing with this issue, are involved in the right spirit. That probably is something that we lose out in balance in healthcare when we form policies. Different aspects of healthcare policies have had the same issue, that the balance shifts to make villains out of people who are driving on the road properly rather than people who are considered, making accidents. So that is something that we need to be very careful of. And the important reason why I say this is that ultimately we have to realize that there is a moral and ethical dimension of couples or people who want children are not able to have children because of real problem. And that population in this country is substantial in nature. We are all here so that they get what they deserve. We are not here so that somebody tells us, to follow 25 diktats and therefore we do that. Primary cause and the primary reason we are here is to ensure that those couples are helped. And that we should never forget, that that's the primary duty. In the process, there are certain laws and certain rules that we need to follow, and we should do that. My only, I think both Nitiz and Nandita mentioned that there are some of the parts of the laws are very good and there are intricacies of the law, and that is true. That is true. I think it ensures that a lot of loopholes are plugged. But what we need is a situation where every law that we form in this country will have defects.
Yeah.
How do we create and state it within the policy that in 1 year's time or 2 years' time, we will ask for experts to come in, see what revisions are required, what corrections needs to be done, and there should be a timetable around it. Aren't we doing the same with GST laws?
Yeah.
Aren't we changing GST laws very often?
frequently.
Why are we doing it? Once the law is formed, it should be implemented. Now, there should be no change in it then. So GST is different and ART is different. This cannot be. And that's because there is surrounding noise around healthcare where everybody feels, oh, now something has been done, like clinical trials you mentioned.
Yeah.
Something has been done, oh, these people have been now put in place, let's leave it like that. But every law needs some attention as it is formed. We have in our constitution a possibility of amending our constitution. Why can't we amend these acts? And why can't we do it in a time duration that is relevant? That is probably the missing link in the whole story. I think this, there are more and more couples of people coming to take treatment, which is a great and encouraging sign in this country. the number of cycles that have happened. First of all, you also need to realize that if 10% of the couples have problems with children, not all of them, need to get treatment. There is some counseling part, there is some, other treatment parts which only a few require really, full treatment. Yeah? So those numbers are increasing year on year, which is a great sign. So we are able to help many people. But to ensure that they get continuous service and we ensure that more and more people get the benefit of it, it is important that we look at laws carefully, we make the corrections required, and we should not be shy of doing those corrections. I think that is probably the underlying feeling today, that ensure that this is a good thing that we have good framework, laws are important. If there are deficiencies in it, correct it in time. And that's probably the most important thing.
Right. Before I move to Amit, from your point of view, because here you are the only representative from the industry and you specialize in women's healthcare, how do you see the opportunity going forward? Because this is just happening and probably it will bloom even more. So your take on that.
Yeah, I think what we are seeing from the industry side is that many doctors are struggling to understand the law.
Right.
That is one thing that we are seeing. And therefore, we are seeing that impact. There is always a business impact of it. But I think the bigger impact that we are seeing is that treatments have got halted, what Nitiz mentioned, that some treatments got halted because of that. So, in fact, the only way industry can help out at this stage is not to promote products as much as say that, look, we have a help desk. I think we have a legal help desk and Dilip can tell you the address. But what we have done is that, look, any doctor who is not able to implement something, just write to us. We have a medical legal expert who is helping out. Help them to ensure that their practice becomes more compliant. Mm-hmm. And that is one thing that the industry can do, because otherwise, both industry and doctors will struggle to exactly to do what they are supposed to do. And that is the impact we are seeing. You really see if in the last 1 year, the number of cycles in this country have actually gone down rather than gone up. And that is a stark reminder that there is something in the law which is preventing people from getting treatment. So that is the impact we are seeing from the industry side. And what we can do is only join hands with everybody to ensure that we provide help on legal advice, and we ensure that if experts are called in, we raise it in the forums, right forums, to say that, look, this needs to be corrected. And that's what industry can do at this moment. Also, industry can ensure that, and that we try and do, is that ensure that if somebody is not compliant, don't do work with them. Right. Ensure that you're not working with them.
Sure.
Because that's important, that ethically you are in the right frame, that you can forsake business, but don't forsake the morality of the story.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. Ma'am, just one quick round and then I'll come back to you. So basically, from what we understand, the provisions of law make it so clear that a lawyer is not required. So, what should be done so that the community doesn't go to you so often, and what probably are the pitfalls that can be avoided?
I didn't know that I'll go out of business by coming here.
Not
jokes
like
apart, there are two aspects I feel, and I heard Madam Rao here. I have had an opportunity to deal with Nandita and Madam Rao for a very long time now, and I endorse what both of them mentioned. Two things here. One is that ART law, the way it is with its own flaws, is still workable.
Right.
But the surrogacy law, the way it is done or the way it is passed, is absolutely not workable. They have created 4 layers of permissions. They have created bureaucratic mechanism. So now what happens is that a couple who is otherwise eligible even under the law for going for surrogacy has to undergo and obtain 4 different permissions from different authorities. Now, most of these authorities don't even know that they are the authority. That is problem number 1. Problem number 2 is that the other authorities out of the 4 have not been fully constituted. So the patient doesn't know where to go. I can give example of Maharashtra, where the state surrogacy board has been notified, but only ex officio members, that are the bureaucrats who are directly nominated under the act, have been nominated, but the expert members have not been nominated, which means that only 50% of the work is done. And the most interesting part is that the chairman of the board is a minister who is there in the city of Mumbai only 2 days in a week because of his political compulsions. Now, I don't blame him for that. The law says that the chairman of the board will be the minister. Now, after even assuming for a minute everything is in place, you look at the cost. Look at the cost that a patient will have to incur in obtaining these permissions. So I am going to have a booming business, no doubt about it. But the fact remains that the patient will have to go from pillar to post. The doctor will have to wait till these permissions are obtained. So in a way, surrogacy law is designed like a disguise ban. Means that unless Supreme Court or government has some vision that, this is wrong and we have done a big mistake, the law has to completely change for it to be even made to work 10%. The way surrogacy law is right now and at the stage at which we are and the progress that we are making, I think so we have created a huge bureaucratic mechanism. The government is paying for that mechanism. It could have easily made it, streamlined. It could have made it simpler. The purpose of the law is noble. Let me say that both the laws are needed. You cannot say that we don't need a law. There have been instances, like Madam Rao also mentioned, that cases were there. Cases were happening here, cases were happening outside India, and I don't want to take any names. But lot of things were happening and government was not entirely wrong in bringing in the laws. But they came down so heavily that now it has become so difficult to make that law functional.
So what exactly are the red flags? Are you talking about medical negligence or breach of ethics? Where are these
See,
problems?
I think so what information I had and whatever the government, all our panelists mentioned, there was really no consultation. I was also called, Nandita and me, we had gone and we had made a presentation to the joint committee of the parliament. When this act was referred in the earlier government, before that, we made almost 25 minutes, we were given the presentation. Most of the committee members agreed to whatever we said. They recommended to the government all the changes that the industry associations had suggested.
Okay.
But in its infinite discretion, the government chose not to implement any of those suggestions. And the most startling fact that I was told by none other than the son of the present chief minister, who is also a doctor, Dr. Shrikant Shinde, that when this act was passed, only 15 members were present in the Lok Sabha. So you can imagine the kind of consultation, the priority, and even the deliberation that must have happened. Shrikant Shinde's son, Dr. Shrikant Shinde himself is a medical practitioner. He is a doctor and he aggressively raised his voice and raised some of the objections that he was party to because he was also part of that joint committee. And unfortunately, the act was passed on the last day of the session on a Friday. So this is how both the laws came into effect. Now, I feel that obviously now Dr. Anirudh Malpani is here. He has filed a writ petition in the Supreme Court, and I thanked him before coming here for at least standing up for the rights of the doctors and the patient after all.
That he always does,
and I feel he is not hopeful, but I am very hopeful about what he has done.
Sure.
So I hope that the hearing is happening on the 3rd of March. So the main contention in that petition is the non-workability of both the laws. And there are a lot of points they have raised. I don't think so this is a forum to discuss that. But the petitioners have done a great job in highlighting a lot of issues. A lot more need to be highlighted. And so far, Supreme Court has taken it positively, but we never know. Courts cannot be predicted.
Yeah, sure. Dr. Rao,
I just like to say that why are we bringing the bedroom scenes into the boardroom? And why is it always the woman? I mean, we've always been said that the woman empowerment, but then you put in more and more laws. Now, if you are going to say that you have to go in for this certification, that certification, age of the person, this and that, then who are we regulating? Are we regulating the process? Are we regulating childbirth? Or are we regulating the entire process of surrogacy, or are we killing the process of surrogacy? See, the idea is, this is what is important. When a government is not providing insurance,
Yeah.
any insurance scheme where government subsidizes the process, then they can lay laws to say that we are going to subsidize this and these are my conditions 1, 2, 3, 4. What is a private bedroom scene and a condition where two parties discuss it? There is absolutely no coercion from both sides. Why should the government say, this is the age in which you can conceive, this is the age on which that person can give the eggs, that is a person. The problem is, if government goes into the details of everyone's private life, then we are nothing but a dictatorial kind of government. Where is the democracy? Secondly, we are now going forward to an age where the man, if he did not have sperms, can actually go through stem cells and produce sperms. So therefore, the idea of donor insemination may be out, maybe 10 years from now. The frogs have already been used, tadpoles have been born, all those things have happened. So also, those women who have had no eggs or premature menopause have also been able to get fibroblasts being converted to oocytes. So therefore, the question of third-party reproduction for oocytes is also gone. Scaffolding and getting stem cells to produce a new uterus is also started, and you are now going to get a new uterus, so you may not get surrogacy. So there, my friends, we have ectogenesis. So the country now, by 2050, will be having enough of pods around everywhere, ectogenesis, and so the entire law that we are having today about surrogacy and all may be a thing of the past. But today, the politicians, I can tell you from Karnataka, the law has been already passed in 2021, and only the government babus have been named by position, but no private person has been appointed to the post who are the expert committee. And there's not a single surrogate case that has been registered, nor has there been any other person who has been put on the board. And every time you go across to that government, they say, what is the hurry? So I want to know, who is in a hurry? Wait 2020 or 2050, you may not be there, because everyone gets into a post and looks for the next 5 years, how they remain in the post for the next 5 years. They're not worried about the 5 years that they have won, because they would have spent that kind of money to get into that post. So, the irony of the situation today, getting into the bedroom of every couple. So therefore, while on one side you have the IT people looking into the AI of every brain of ours and looking at what is our selection, they take away our capacity to think and they put everything on our table. Government takes away our reproductive potential and also decides what we should produce, what we shouldn't produce. So finally, are we being a bunch of robots at the end of it? Is what I want to ask. And therefore, science is producing going at a Sputnik speed that we are only being, kind of emissaries in between or pawns in between, that we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't do anything, and at the end of it, neither gynecologists will be there, because if you have them all in the pod, where is the question of preeclampsia? Where is the question of premature labor? Where is the question of maternity leave? Where is the question of obstetrician? It's not only, my dear friends, why microdeletion? It's an obstetrician deletion. It's also a lawyer deletion. I rest my case.
I mean, this is so, the fallacy is that you have a consultation process, and then the process doesn't move forward when you actually enact the law. So
It's taking so long.
yeah.
20 years to come to one stage.
Yeah.
And 3 months to bring in a law that does not apply to us.
There's
Absolutely.
been no surrogacy case for the last 2 years, absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, one thing I really want to bring forth here is that we are forgetting that we are a nation of rich and poor.
Exactly.
You know, there are 300 million couples who are in the reproductive age group. And we say the infertility is 10%, the 30 million couples. At least 10 to 20% need IVF. That's about 3 to 6 million cycles. How many are we doing? The registry that ISAR has is about 2.5, maybe 3 lakh cycles.
Yeah.
So what we need, if they've got the law, then they recognize that it's a disease. They should bring it under Ayushman Bharat.
Yes.
Absolutely. It's so important. Madhya Pradesh government has actually bought it and have given their people, those who have the domicile of Madhya Pradesh, are eligible for infertility treatment under Ayushman Bharat. So I think the number of cycles which are dropping is probably because of the cost and other things which the doctors are not clear about. But if the government takes a proactive step and brings us under Ayushman Bharat, I think the law will also progress better and more cycles will be done and more people will benefit. I think that is very important. So you bring the law, that's fine, but do other proactive things where the people will benefit, the poor people will benefit. I think that's very, very important.
And it's also not under insurance, I think, private.
No.
No, right
And
now it is not
in
covered.
fact, insurance never covers you. You have to have 3 months or 6 months before they will give you for any disease.
Yeah.
Now here they have told us that insure the donor. Now I'm not going to insure the donor 6 months in advance and she's going to wait for me for my patient. She's going to be picked up and within a month everything is done. So insurance companies are now forming packages because they realize that we need this kind of a package. So nothing is ready.
Right. Dr. Murdia, your turn on, ma'am mentioned about this is a country of rich and poor, and you had a financial angle with already 100 centers. How do you think this actually enables growing your business or opening up new opportunities, or does it really not go that far?
No, I think that, in terms of what law is, everyone has expressed their point of view. There are some teething issues which I started with. But at the end of the day, it's the law of the land. Everyone has to follow. There is no saying no about it. Though, as he said about the GST, things will change. I think what we need to do is we have to forget the past, whatever has happened. The government has came up with the law. There are teething issues. There are problems being faced now with when it concerns with the patient, when it's concerned with the doctors, when it concerns with the clinic. This should be raised in the right forum to the government to say that, yes, you have passed the law. Yes, you have done all these things. But these are the issues that are still being faced, and we need to relook at these issues from a different angle, because the time when you passed the law, you didn't see the practical application. And now we have seen practically almost 1.5, 2 years being passed. And now this is what the challenges are being faced, and this should be raised in the right forum. And government, I think, to a certain extent, they are okay with changing things, and they have changed a few things. But the one thing that me sitting in the national board is they are very rigid about commercialization. That is something they don't want to do any changes in the law, and they will not do any changes. You look at the Organ Donation Act, how it is, it's been going on from a long time. The way they have thought about the Organ Donation Act, the same way they have thought about surrogacy. They have considered both these things on the same commercial angle, that what was happening in the Organ Donation Act, and that is why they came up with that law, and that is why they came up with the surrogacy law. So anyway, I mean, there will be things which will change, but I think when it comes to a larger population getting affected, GST, everyone is affected. But when it comes to IVF or ART, there is a very small set of population which is getting affected. So it will not raise like a public voice. It has to be raised by the society, by the community, by the doctors, in the right forum, to tell the person that this is what you have made, this is the medical significance of this particular aspect, this is the practical significance of enforcing this aspect, and bring to their notice that these things are happening, and that is what it has to be corrected. In terms of expansion, I think not India, all over the world, there is a lot of consolidation going in the IVF market. It's being a very big hit. All the investors are looking at healthcare right now, and in the healthcare, they're looking at IVF being one of their favorite choices. The whole Indian market, I think, going forward in the next 5 years, will undergo a consolidation. There are a lot of chains who have started expanding in India. There are a lot of new chains coming up and putting up centers. So I think in terms of complexities of law, yes, it is there, but still with the law, you can still start and doing things and open more centers. At the end of the day, I remember, in the past, there were issues with donors going to the police station and complaining, and the police didn't have an opinion that is it legal or is it not legal. Now at least it's legal. There is a law in place which says that donors are allowed and surrogates are allowed.
Right.
So I think in that aspect, the law is good. But yeah, we will always have to, transform ourselves, develop ourselves, innovate ourselves, change which is not working right for the people, for the doctors, for the clinics.
Now, with this legal framework in place, do you think it will enable the government to weed out those fly-by-night clinics which will make space for you, and then you can actually expand in the smaller cities and places which are not in the metro?
I would not agree to that.
Okay.
Because I feel that as doctors and clinics, even the small clinic are there in the country. They have applied for the registration, and if you follow the law properly and if you have proper standard operating procedures in your clinic, you can actually do that. In terms of the cost factor, I completely agree the cost factor will increase. The clinic will have to have extra resources in place for the data work, for the monitoring, and making sure that each and every person in the clinic follows the law. And to a certain extent, it will also increase the cost to the patient. The whole IVF treatment in the country will, become more expensive for the couples.
It will, okay. Yeah.
I had a point.
Yes.
He mentioned about organ donation and organ transplant. See, when Organ Transplant Act was passed, everything went underground. Okay, so I see as far as surrogacy is concerned, instead of expanding, you will see a lot of black market happening. At the end of the day, when you don't have a commercial angle to it, no one is going to come forward and be a surrogate or act as a surrogate without any consideration. So you will land up having clinics, but you will probably have, rogue elements are there in every profession. I'm not saying that even in my profession there are people who would do it. I wouldn't do it, Nandita wouldn't do it, Madam Rao wouldn't do it, anyone wouldn't, Mr. Murdia wouldn't do it. But at the end of the day, you will find people who will have desperate couples having children who have not had children for years. And there would be people who would be offering underground services exactly the way organ transplant was happening. You see the Organ Transplant Act, the history of Organ Transplant Act, how many organ donations are happening in India vis-a-vis the act, whether it has helped or no. Same is the case with the PCPNDT. We had suffered immense problems with PCPNDT. I had done tons and tons of cases for doctors, for not ticking a form, they used to go and file a criminal case. For writing non-applicable NA on that F form, they used to file a criminal case. This was PCPNDT Act, and these two acts are also going the same way because appropriate authority is also the same authority as PCPNDT Act. So you will see a lot of underground market. Donors are also not supposed to be paid. You will never have a donor coming forward and saying that I will do egg donation free of cost.
Yeah.
It's hardly a matter of 45,000, 50,000. Anyone will pay cash for that. I don't see anything getting regularized here. On the contrary, I would see a lot of black market happening.
I just had a very different point come to the law. It's not about the law, it's not about anything. As an industry, I can sense one more danger.
Uh-huh.
And that danger doesn't get discussed because we discuss laws. The fact that the mainstay of IVF treatment is gonadotropins. The raw material is a certain kind of urine. It only comes from China. In the last 2 years, China has taken advantage and increased prices 4 times of the raw material.
It has.
4 times.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
These people have not seen passed on costs, so
Massive.
they are happy.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's the, and they might, tomorrow China might say no. what will happen then? So we need to, as industry, we are thinking of how to solve this issue. And that threat, I don't think the medical community has even heard. Yeah? Yeah, so they will have to keep working with us to understand that this threat exists. It is absolutely real. It is today, and we need to find different solutions to solve this. Technology, yeah, we can use technology, we can use recombinant technology to solve some of this, but this is something that gets, doesn't get so much mention as something else. So the whole treatment can come under threat if we don't solve this issue. We are in the position, we will end up solving it, but we will all have to work together to ensure that this happens.
Absolutely, yeah. And I can actually sense why you're saying this, because the industry has actually been kind of made a pawn. They can actually regulate the prices the way they want. So we've been actually dependent on China for a very long time on certain drugs. So yeah. Just to get some more clarity, is there enough information on the ART banks and the ART clinics? Is that something that raises a lot of contention? Dr. Palshetkar, you want to go?
As we said, the rules and regulations, some of them have been gazetted, some have not been gazetted. We've been talking. So there's no real clarity. As a president of the IVF Society of India, in fact, I was talking with Bharat Serum only, and we wanted to educate our gynecologists how to do the law and everything properly. But there is absolutely no clarity yet, because as Nitiz is on the board, so he gives us an input on how things can function. But unless it's gazetted,
yes.
I mean, it has no say. So that needs to be done. Like the bank, the clinics, we are not sure what is happening. So everybody is in a very, very confused state. We are telling them how we can interpret. We take the help of Amit, Karkhanis, to interpret. Madam has always also been on a lot of webinars with us. We are interpreting it that way. But it's very, very difficult. As I said, the IVF part is progressing well. Mm-hmm. The only positive thing that I can see out of this is with the National Registry, IVF of India, all the good units will get a credibility in the world. All our data will be accepted, and with the amount of humongous work that we can do and we will do, once this gets streamlined, it'll really be recognized. So I know this is the teething problem which is there. I think the law itself has been good because we needed it, but a few things are wrong which we need to change. Like Anirudh is going to the court, we as an organization are talking to the government, Madam is on the board, Nitiz is on the board. So everybody, in the different ways is working towards getting some clarification.
Does this registration process go through the rigorous examination? Because how does it work, if you can? Yeah.
The registration process is almost like a checklist.
Okay.
Incubator there, tick. Something else is there, tick. But it does not tell you functionality. It does not tell you what is the kind of quality functionality in terms of the assessment of the entire thing. What is your blastocyst score? Or what is your QA and QCs? No. So therefore, the people who come to test you for there, they also have to be trained. So it's an evolutionary process. It may not happen initially, but over a period of when they come for re-accreditation, they may be trained. What I would like to say from my process or journey of 20 years, I was vociferous in telling them, don't make a bank. Let it be under the IVF clinics itself. Because you're only creating another kind of corruption by saying that the bank is separate, but the bank can collect eggs. And then there was anonymity in that earlier clause. Now, how do you take an egg donor and say anonymity? Just because you put
Impossible.
a burqa?
Yeah, not possible.
It's not possible. But, yes, it was. But Dr. Bhargava, bless him, he's an excellent person. But he was very keen on having this particular thing to end corruption. I don't know how. But that came in at that time, though we were against it, not to have it. Now the present law also says that the RT bank, But the good thing is that the ART bank can be housed in an ART clinic,
Clinic
also
itself, okay.
with a separate management, which is again another thing. So it can remain there. So egg pickup can be done, but it can be stored in a bank. The difference being with the bank and the clinic is that the bank can store the oocytes, but they cannot fertilize. But that requires more integrity.
Yeah.
So on one side we are saying that, we are going to be very, this thing, it is like, Ram and Krishna, whether Krishna is more truthful or Ram is more truthful. I am not here to debate that. But at the same time, we have to understand that the more we try to fragment everything, everywhere you are going to find corruption. So you are saying that you can store that, but you can also store eggs for an intended woman in a clinic. But if you are going to take eggs from somebody, for the purpose of donation, it has to be in a bank. So, how well you document is very important. And all the people who come to inspect your centers, how are they going to check that?
Yes.
Are they going to unfreeze and then have a look at those eggs and then make sure? Now, this is something that I want to ask everybody. And if something goes wrong, Amit is going to be there to sue that person who's walking in, saying that those eggs got spoiled because these people went and inspected.
Yeah.
So we are going to have more litigations, more business for you, Amit. So therefore, we have to have a system whereby this is going to be online kind of, accreditation, but we
Right.
are still far from that. But nevertheless, some form of regulation and an act is necessary. The good people will anyway follow, and the bad people will have ways to go break it and move forward. That's
Right.
what I'm saying.
Right. Do we still have some time? Okay. Okay, so just one quick round of questions, one or two, if anyone wants to kind of ask some questions. Dr. Malpani?
I think we all take pride in the fact that we are specialists, and all these guys who pass these laws are idiots because they don't understand anything about eggs and embryos and how to freeze and ART banks. I think we need to understand that this law, all the problems which you're describing are not bugs. These are all features which have been built into the law very deliberately because they've not been done with a scientific perspective. They're actually being done with an agenda, and I think we need to acknowledge that. This is not an enabling law or an empowering law. It's a disabling law.
Is it? Oh,
Just to accept that fact, because all the time we keep on saying,
So very-
we go to the minister, we explain, we do this, but we designed in such a way not to allow you to do it. And we think we're great, we're such clever doctors, we've done so much. We change. Precedents of societies change every 1 year. The minister will go on forever. The secretary will remain for so much time. And they will all be very sweet to us. They'll talk to you, they'll give you a cup of chai when you go to Delhi. They'll say, yes, of course, you're so smart. Yes, we need to fix this, we need to change that. And what will happen?
zero.
Dr. Kamini Rao described that
It's
extremely
beautiful,
well.
yeah.
She's been through it. And maybe it'll be the next generation of doctors who will go through it or whatever else. But our patients are going to continue suffering. So I'm really not very optimistic, no matter what Amit says. Part of the reason I filed a case in the Supreme Court is because I think keeping quiet is the wrong thing to do. And that's why we need a voice. We're expressing the voice on behalf of our patients. That's the only message I wanted to get across. But no.
You summarized it better than anyone else can. Two words which actually resonate is disability of law and non-workability. I mean, I thought we'll have a more progressive kind of conversation, but hopefully we'll be able to find ways and move ahead from here. So thank you so much.